Hey guys, today I want to talk about narrative tenses. So, what are narrative tenses? Narrative tenses are verb tenses that are used to talk about events that happened in the past. And when we tell, it all started when I woke up early. Now I'm sure you guys recognize the structures used in these sentences. I had, it all started, I woke up. Of course, these verbs are all in the past simple. Now, just a bit of revision to talk about events which started and finished in the past is, of course, why we use the past simple. Some more examples. Michael Collins was born in 1890. Now, Michael Collins, he was an important figure in the fight for Irish independence. He spent some time as a prisoner of war after the 1916 Rising. So in this paragraph, I'm telling the story of Michael Collins' life. First, he was born, he was an important figure in the fight for Irish independence, and he spent some time as a prisoner of war. So here we've got three examples of the past simple, and one action happened after the other in terms of the sequence of the narrative. What about here? I had a really unusual day last Friday. It all started when I woke up early, so again, past simple. But have a look. I looked out the window and it was snowing heavily and the traffic was moving very slowly. Was snowing, was moving. Now these structures, they're not the past simple. They are the past. So we've got a combination here of the past simple and the past continuous. And the form, we just use our subject plus was or were, and then we use a verb plus ing. So of course, I was, you were, he, she, it, was, they, we, were. Okay, what do you see here? It looks like a tiger. When he was walking in the jungle, he saw a tiger. So, in this sentence, we've got an example of the past continuous, when he was walking, and we've also got the past simple. So we can combine the past simple with the past continuous to show that one action happened whilst another action was still happening. Or in other words, interrupted actions. So have a look at the timeline here. Both actions are in the past, but we've got the past continuous when he was walking, and as this action was happening, he saw a tiger. Let's have a look at a few more examples. So when I left the supermarket, it was raining. I broke my leg when I was skiing. The phone rang when Mary was cooking the dinner. Now, you might notice in these examples, past continuous is describing the situations that go on for a longer period of time. So in the second example, skiing, this is the longer action here. In the third example, cooking was the action that was happening for the longer time. And the past simple, it describes actions that happen more quickly over a shorter space of time. So Mary was cooking the dinner when the phone rang. The phone ringing, it's a much shorter duration than the action of cooking the dinner. Skiing was happening for a longer time than the incident of the leg breaking. And just like in the first example, it was raining before I left the supermarket. It was probably still raining sometime after I left the supermarket, so it was raining. This is the longer action. Past simple is the shorter action, the action that happens more quickly. Just another important point here when we're using the past simple and the past continuous together. Have a look at these two sentences. So when they arrived, Sarah was cooking dinner. And sentence B, when they arrived, Sarah cooked dinner. Now the meaning here, it's not the same, it's quite different. So in sentence A, Sarah was cooking dinner. What we understand from this is Sarah started cooking dinner before they arrived. They arrived, this is the shorter action. Was cooking dinner, the longer action, the past continuous to describe the action that went on for a longer time. In sentence B, when they arrived, Sarah cooked dinner. We've got past simple, when they arrived, and then past simple again, Sarah cooked dinner. So remember, we can use the past simple like this when we want to talk about actions that happen in sequence. One action happened after the other. I woke up, I got dressed, I brushed my teeth, I went to work. Past simple, past simple, past simple. We're describing the sequence of events one after the other. So in sentence B, Sarah started cooking dinner after they arrived. They arrived first, then Sarah cooked dinner. So this is an important difference to understand. Okay, before we move on to the slightly more complex structures, just a little bit of practice for you guys. So there's 3 sentences here. In each sentence, we've got verbs in brackets. Your job, based on what we've talked about so far in the lesson, see if you can put the verb into the correct form. Should it be in the past simple or the past continuous? And just be careful if you're using the past simple, because some of the verbs might be irregular. So I'll give you guys a minute to think about it. Okay, so number 1, the day the news, for my exams. Alright, so think about this here. We've got 2 actions. Now, for a shorter action, an action that happened more quickly, we use the past simple. So the action that was happening for some time, I was studying. So we've got the past continuous. Number 2, excuse me, sir, can you tell me what you at 10 o'clock last night? So what do you guys think here? Should it be the past simple or the past continuous? This time we're using the past continuous. So it's an action that was probably happening for a longer time in the past. So what were you doing at 10 o'clock last night? 3, as soon as the accident, an ambulance. Okay, so think about this one. We've got 2 actions here. Now, were the actions happening at the same time? Did one action interrupt another action? Or did one action happen first and then another action happen after? Well, in this case, we've got one action that happened and then another action happened after. So we're describing a sequence of events, therefore we can use past simple. So as soon as I saw the accident, I called an ambulance. In other words, I saw the accident, then I called an ambulance. Alright, great. Good job. So, just a few important points to remember before we move on. We can use the past continuous to set the scene and describe past activities. It was snowing and the traffic was moving slowly. We can combine the past simple with the past continuous to show that one action happened whilst another action was still happening. So remember our example, it was raining when I left the supermarket. And finally, the past continuous describes situations that go on for a longer time, but the past simple describes actions that happen more quickly, or the interrupting actions. So the phone rang when I was cooking dinner. Past simple for the phone rang, the action that happened more quickly, and the longer action of cooking, we're using the past continuous. Alright, great. Next up, have a look at this little guy here. Do you know what he's called? He's quite a famous figure in Irish mythology. This is a leprechaun. And the reason I'm showing you this is because my friend told me that he had seen a leprechaun. My friend told me that he had seen a leprechaun. Maybe he had had a few beers at the time, I'm not sure. But have a look at the sentence. In particular, the part in bold here. He had seen a leprechaun. Now, what structure is this? It's not the past simple. This is the past perfect. And we use the past perfect to talk about an action that happened earlier in the past. To think about an action that happened before another action in the past. So in this example here, my friend told me. So this is the past simple. This is one action that happened in the past. But he's telling me about another action that happened before this action. So he told me that he had seen a leprechaun. And our structure here, of course, we've got our subject, and we're using had, and then the past participle. So of course the past participle is the third form of the verb. In the above example, have, had, and again had in the past participle. Okay, some more examples here of the past perfect. Lucy rang Simon's doorbell at 9 a.m. yesterday morning. But John had already left the house. Maybe John is Simon's housemate. So we've got the action of Lucy who rang the doorbell at 9 a.m. But before this action, an even earlier past action, was John leaving the house. So the past perfect, again, is describing the earlier past action. The action in the past that happened before another past action. And another attacked. Okay. And a final example here. The landlord sent them a letter because they hadn't paid their rent. So the reason he sent the letter was because before they hadn't paid their rent. So the earlier past action here was them not paying the rent. Then the landlord sent the letter. So once again, past perfect to describe an earlier action in the past, an action that happened before another action in the past. Okay, now just be really careful using the past perfect. The most common mistake people make is they overuse it. They use it a little bit too much. Or they use it simply because we're talking about something that happened a long time ago in the past. So have a look at these examples here. The Romans had spoken Latin. Now this is incorrect. We should just use the past simple here. The Romans spoke Latin. And the reason is because we're just describing a past event. We're not describing something that happened before another action in the past. It's not relevant to any other past event. So remember, we only use the past perfect when we want to refer to a past that is earlier than another time in the narrative, in the story. Alright, great. Just have a look here. I had been working at the company for 5 years when I got the promotion. Had been working. So this structure here, it's the past perfect continuous. And we can also use the past perfect in the continuous form. And we use this, again, when we want to talk about a longer action that started in the past, and this action continued up until another time in the past. So, he had been working at the company. This action started in the past, continued for a long time, for 5 years, and then he got the promotion. So getting the promotion, it's another action in the past. So we've got the longer action of working for the company, and this continued up to the other past action of getting the promotion. And our form here with the past perfect continuous, had plus been plus verb plus ing. So let's look at some more examples. I realized I had been working too hard, so I decided to have a holiday. I had been working. Longer action started in the past and it continued up to another time in the past. I'd been working too hard until I decided to have a holiday. By the time Jane arrived, we had been waiting for 3 hours. So again, we've got the action of waiting that continued for 3 hours up until Jane arrived. Okay, so I've prepared a little quiz for you guys. So we've got a short story, and your job here is to choose the option you think is grammatically correct. The best option to complete the blank space based on what we've talked about so far in the lesson. So Inspector Brown was called to a burglary, but by the time he arrived, the thief, so our options here are went, which is the past simple, or had gone, which is the past perfect. So here, we want to talk about an action that happened before another action in the past. The thief left before we arrived, so for this reason, we want to use the past perfect. By the time he arrived, the thief had gone. Past perfect. Okay, very good. Next up, while he, in the garden, Inspector Brown noticed an open window and a tiny set of footprints. Okay, so we've got the action. He's in the garden, he's looking, and then he noticed an open window and the tiny set of footprints. So notice this is a shorter action or an interrupting action, which means the first action, the action of looking, we're going to use the past continuous here. So while he was looking in the garden, Inspector Brown noticed an open window and a tiny set of footprints. Okay, and finally, when Inspector Brown looked inside the house, he, who had committed the burglary. So he was discovering, or he discovered. Is it the past continuous here, or the past simple? This time we want to use the past simple. He discovered, and remember the reason is, he looked inside the house, and then he discovered. So we've got one past action and another past action happening after it. And we're describing a sequence of events in the past. So we discovered who had committed the burglary. So maybe with the tiny set of footprints, maybe it was the leprechaun we saw earlier. Okay, a little bit more of a challenge now. Another story for you guys. This time I'm not going to give you the options. You'll have a verb, and your job is to put the verb into one of 3 forms. You can use the past simple, the past continuous, or the past perfect. So, first part of our story. Last night I, home, next to the river, when something strange to me. So, last night I, can you guys remember here? It should be our past continuous. So last night I was walking home next to the river when something strange happened to me. So we've got the action of walking, past continuous, and then past simple for the thing that happened to me. It was late at night, and a long and difficult day at work. So I decided to stop by the riverside and look at the moon for a while. So it was late at night, and so work, of course, it happened earlier in the day. So we're describing an earlier action, an action in the past that happened before another past action. So can you guys remember what we should use here? It should be the past perfect. And our form is had plus past participle. So our main verb is have, past participle is had. So to make this grammatically correct, I had a long and difficult day at work. I know it sounds a little bit strange, but if we follow our grammar, follow our form, this is the grammatically correct way to express this meaning. It was late at night, past simple, and I had a long and difficult day at work. Okay, I felt very tired, so my eyes, and after a few minutes, I asleep. Okay, I felt very tired, so this time, it's our past simple. Close is a regular verb. We need to use the past perfect. So the moon had moved behind a cloud, and it was very dark and cold. Okay, next sentence. The wind and an owl in a tree above me. So what am I doing here? I'm setting the scene. I'm describing what the scene was like. And when we want to set a scene in a narrative, we can use the past continuous. So the wind was blowing and an owl was hooting in a tree above me. So to hoot, this verb describes, we've got the action of rubbing your eyes, that happened after another action in the past. We're describing the sequence in a narrative. So I looked down at the water. Look, a regular verb, so we just add ed to put it into past simple. A creature out of the water and towards me. So we're describing what was happening here. So a creature was coming out of the water and was moving towards me. So this time we've got the past continuous and the past continuous. And about longer actions that are happening in the past. It was a bright flash and the creature, and then, okay. So the creature roar, the noise an animal or a creature makes, a loud noise. Here, our structure is, once again, the past simple. It's a regular verb, so the creature roared and then disappeared. Okay, so we've got past simple, we're describing the sequence. I couldn't believe what? Alright, so be careful here. Couldn't believe, but we're talking now about an earlier action. So I couldn't believe this earlier thing that happened in the past. So if we want to describe an action in the past that happened before another past action, we use a past perfect. So I couldn't believe what had happened. Had was past participle. Happen, it's a regular verb. So our past simple and past participle are the same. We just add ed. I stood up at the moon and quickly home. So I stood up at the moon and quickly home. So here we've got three actions. You stood up, then you looked at the moon and quickly walked home. So we've got one action happening after the other. We're describing the sequence of things, and that's why we're using our past simple here. Okay, the end. Great job, guys. Really, really good. So here we can see, if we want to tell a cohesive narrative, a good story, we should use a combination of different structures, our narrative tenses. So, just some important points to remember from this lesson. Past perfect is used to talk about an action that happened before another action in the past. So be careful not to make the common mistakes many people make. Don't overuse the past perfect. Make sure if you're using it, it's relevant to another past action. And the past perfect continuous is used to talk about a longer action that happened before another action in the past, or up to the point of another action. So when he arrived at my house, I had been waiting for hours. Okay. And finally, the most important point, we should use a range of tenses to build up a story about past events. So it's much better to use this combination than to just be repeating the past simple, for example. Okay, alright, great job, guys. In our next lesson, we're going to focus on conditionals. So of course in English we've got several different conditional structures. So in this lesson we're going to have a look at 4 of these structures. We're going to look at why we use each one, and we're also going to look at how we should correctly form the structures. So let's go. The first structure we want to look at is the zero conditional. So for example, if you heat ice, it melts. So what are we doing here? We use the zero conditional to make statements about the real world. The zero conditional, it often refers to general truths such as scientific facts. So you can see in the above example. In terms of when we're talking about when we use this structure, the time is now or always. So something that is always true. And the situation is real and possible. So we're not talking about anything hypothetical or imaginary. And our form, as you can probably see, if you heat ice, it melts. So here we've got if plus the present simple, if you heat, and then once again we've got the present simple, it melts. So just a third person singular, it melts. So we add the s for he, she, or it in the present simple. Okay, let's check out a few more examples of the zero conditional. So if it rains, the grass gets wet. If it rains, the grass gets wet. Something it's always true, it's a fact. Present simple is present simple. You get purple if you mix red and blue. You get purple if you mix red and blue. So once again, something that is always true. This is a fact. And present simple plus present simple. And you can probably notice here that in these 2 sentences, I've actually swapped the clauses. So in the first sentence, I'm beginning with the if clause. In the second sentence, I'm beginning with the other clause. You can do this with all the conditional tenses in English. It doesn't matter if you want to start with the if clause or the other clause. The meaning is still the same. In fact, the only difference is, you probably notice a small mistake here, because if we begin with the if clause, we should always separate the 2 clauses with a comma. So right here after rains, there should be a comma. If you begin with the other clause, you don't need to include the comma. Just another point about the zero conditional before we move on. It's also often used to give instructions. So we do this by using the imperative in the main clause. So, for example, if you want to come, call me before 5 o'clock. So you can see I'm using the imperative here. Call me before 5. Okay, call me on my mobile if you get lost. So here you can see once again, in the if clause, we should always separate our 2 clauses with a comma. If we decide to begin with the other clause, we don't need to include a comma. Okay, great. Next up, we've got our first conditional. So here's an example. If I drink coffee tonight, I won't sleep well. If I drink coffee tonight, I won't sleep well. So here, our use is quite different. We're not talking about something that's always true or a fact. We're being a bit more specific here. So we use the first conditional to refer to present or the future where the situation is real. So the first conditional refers to a possible condition and its result. So this situation here, I'm not imagining it. It's possible. It's something that could happen. In fact, it's probable and more than likely will happen. If I drink coffee tonight, I won't sleep well. The caffeine will probably keep me awake. And our form here, again, it's if plus present simple, if I drink. But in our other clause, we're using our future simple, or in other words, will or won't, plus infinitive. So if I drink coffee tonight, I won't sleep well. Some examples here of the first conditional. If you don't hurry, you will miss the bus. You'll miss the bus. So again, if plus present simple, and then your will plus infinitive. You will miss Again, the situation, it's real. We're talking about the future, time in the future, and it's probably will happen. If you don't hurry, you probably will miss your bus. You'll get a cold if you don't wear a coat. Okay, so right now in Ireland it's freezing. So if you don't wear a coat, you'll probably get a cold. Lots of people are going around with the flu right now. If you make a mistake, nobody will notice. Don't worry, nobody will notice. Again, if plus present simple, if you make, and then you've got your future simple, will plus infinitive. Cool. So just before we look at some more conditional structures, we'll review what we've talked about so far. So the zero conditional, it's used to talk about general truths and scientific facts. We can also use it in the imperative in the main clause. So our form is if plus present simple and then present simple. On our first conditional, we use to talk about a likely situation in the present or future. So a real possible situation, something that will probably happen. And our form, if plus present simple, but then in our main clause, we've got will or won't plus the infinitive. And just remember, you can change the clauses. It doesn't matter which clause you begin with, the meaning will be the same. And this is true for all of the conditional structures in English. Okay, next we'll have a look at the second conditional. So, an example here. If I won the lottery, I would buy a big house. So of course, if I won the lottery, I would have a lot of money and I'd buy a big house. But unfortunately, is this a situation that is likely to happen in the future? Sadly, I don't think so. I mean, I'm imagining it, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen. It's quite unlikely. And that's what we use the second conditional for, to talk about an unreal or an imaginary situation in the present or future. You've probably noticed our form, it's quite different this time. So I'm no longer using the present simple with if I won. So this is, of course, the past simple. So if plus past simple, and then we're using would plus infinitive in the main clause. So we'll take a look at a few more examples now of the second conditional. If I saw a ghost, I would scream. Now I probably won't see a ghost, at least I hope not. So it's an unlikely, unreal or imaginary situation. But if I did, I would scream. I'd be very scared. So if plus past simple, would plus infinitive. Just another point here. It is correct, and it's actually very common to say if I were instead of if I was when we're using the second conditional. So you'll often hear native speakers say if I were. This is totally acceptable in the second conditional. Now in other circumstances, of course, we'd say I was, but in the conditional, we're allowed to say if I were. It's grammatically correct. So an example, if I were taller, I would play basketball. Unfortunately, I'm not taller, so I don't play. So it's an unlikely or imaginary situation. Our subject is I, but because it's a second conditional, I can also say where. Now here, you could use was. It's totally okay too. It doesn't change the meaning. Both are possible. And just one more important point before we move on. We can also use the second conditional as a way of giving advice to somebody. But when we do this, we must say, if I were. So if I were you, not if I was you. It's actually grammatically incorrect to say, if I was you. I mean, it's not a huge mistake. Many native speakers do this, but the grammatically correct form in this situation is if I were. So for example, if I were you, I would book a holiday. So the structure here is the second conditional, but I'm using it to give someone advice. I'm telling them what they should do. If I were you, I would book a holiday. So in this case, if I said if I was you, it would actually be grammatically incorrect. We need to say if I were you here. Okay, Cool. One more point about the second condition. We can also use modals in the main clause instead of would, and we can do this to express a different degree of certainty, permission, or recommendation about the outcome. So instead of saying would, for example, we could say we might buy a bigger house if we had more money. So we're changing the degree of certainty here. We're saying it's possible, but it's not definitely something I would do if this situation was real. If you gave me a ticket, I could go with you to the concert. So we're using a different modal verb here, could. So if you gave me a ticket, it would be possible for me to go to the concert. I'm not saying I'll definitely go, I'm just expressing that it would then be possible. Okay, great. Next up, our third conditional. So, for example, you would have passed your exam if you studied harder. Now have a look at this. We're no longer talking about something in the future here, or even the present. We're talking about the past. The exam was in the past. Now it's not a real situation in the past. I'm imagining something. And that's what we use the third conditional for. So we refer to a time in the past and a situation that is contrary to reality. So it's not something that happened in the past. So the third conditional is used to refer to an unreal past condition and its probable past result. So you would have passed your exam if you studied harder. Did you study harder? No. But this is probably what would have happened if you did. And that's what we use our third conditional for. Now our form here, it's a little bit more complex. So we've got some more of our past tenses here, or our narrative tenses. If plus past perfect. And remember, the past perfect is had plus past participle. And then in our main clause, we've got the perfect conditional. So in other words, would plus have plus past participle. So let's look at some more examples of our third conditional. If I had known you were coming, I would have prepared something. So if I had known, this is if plus past perfect, and then we've got our perfect conditional, would plus have plus past participle. So did I know you were coming? No. So this situation didn't happen. It's contrary to the reality, but I'm imagining what would have happened. You would have enjoyed last night more if you hadn't drunk so much. So unfortunately this person, they drank too much, but they would have had a better time if they hadn't drunk as much. So this is what would have happened if the situation was different, or would probably have happened. If I had worked harder, I might have passed the exam. Did I work hard? No. Did I pass the exam? Unfortunately not. So if plus past perfect, and here you can see, just like in the second conditional, I've changed would and I'm using a different modal verb, and I'm doing this to express a different degree of certainty. So I'm not sure you would have passed the exam, but it's possible. You might have passed the exam. It was a difficult exam, I'm not 100% sure, but you definitely would have had a better chance of passing if you had worked harder. And a final example here. I could have gone to the beach if it had been sunny. It wasn't sunny, so it was not possible for me to go to the beach. So again, you've got your perfect conditional here, and then your if plus past perfect. Okay, let's do a little bit of practice. So I've got some sentences for you guys. Your job is to put the verb into the correct form. So here I want you to use either the second or the third conditional. So have a look at the sentences, remember what we talked about, and see if you can put the verb into the correct form. And I'll give you guys a minute to think about it, and then we'll correct. let's have a look. So number one, if I fitter, I would run in the marathon. So have a look at our main clause here first. I would run. So we've got would plus infinitive. So is this situation real or likely? No. When are we talking about? Well, we're talking about something in the present or the future. It's an unreal or imaginary situation. So it's our second conditional. And our form for the second conditional, you guys remember? It's if plus past simple. Now our subject is I here. You may also remember that when we're using our second conditional with I, it's also acceptable to say if I were fitter. Now here you could say if I was fitter, and that would be totally okay too. And number two, I so much food if you had told me you weren't hungry. Okay, if you had told me. So here we've got if plus past perfect. So this tells us that we need to use our third conditional here. So I, can you remember the form? Would plus have plus past participle. So here, I wouldn't have made so much food if you had told me you weren't hungry. Unfortunately, I made the food, so this situation is contrary to the reality of what actually happened. Number three, if I were you, I that phone. So what's happening here? You may remember we can use the second conditional to give advice, and when we do this, we must say if I were. So if I were you, I wouldn't buy. So negative second conditional would plus infinitive. In this case, would not. So we use the contracted form, wouldn't buy. And finally, Jenny wouldn't have moved to Ireland if she to find a job there first. So wouldn't have moved. So we've got a perfect conditional here, and then we've got if. So it's going to be our third conditional, so we need to use our past perfect. Quite a difficult example here. So if she, how do we put be able in the past perfect? If she had been able to find a job there first. Okay. Alright guys, really good job today. So just the important points to remember. Second conditional is used to talk about an unreal or imaginary situation, present or future, and its result. Okay, so if I won the lottery, I would buy a big house. Unfortunately, I probably won't win the lottery, so it's an unlikely situation. And our form is if plus past simple, would plus infinitive. And instead of would, remember you can also use your modal verbs to express a different degree of certainty or ability. Third conditional, and we use this to talk about an unreal or imaginary situation in the past and its result. So a situation that is contrary, goes against the reality of what actually happened. And our form here, if plus past perfect, so remember our past perfect is had plus our past participle, and the perfect condition would have plus past participle. Okay. Thank you very much for watching today, guys. I hope you found some of the information in today's lesson useful, and I look forward to seeing you guys again in the future. Cheers.